Our master, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, used this defense speech, which was published in Samsun by the newspaper Büyük Cihad, after having been read in the court in Istanbul, and the case resulted in an acquittal. Our coward enemies again prompted the judiciary to move against us this Ramadan. The matter concerns a secret communist society. One of them, while taking some air in the countryside and sitting alone on a hillside, 3 armed gentlemen and a sergeant approached me in a way that was completely outside the law and accused me of not wearing a peaked cap. They took me by force to the police station. So I say to all the courts of law, whose purpose is the administering of justice, while those who act illegally in 5 respects and break the laws of Islam in 5 ways in the name of Islam should be accused of illegal behavior, they will surely be punished by the Supreme Tribunal on the last day for trampling the law in that way and using it as an excuse and calling me torments of the conscience for 2 years. Which law in the world would permit someone who has been a recluse for 35 years and goes neither to any market or town to be censured for not wearing a European-style hat? These last 28 years, 5 provinces and their police and 5 courts of law have not interfered with his headgear, and no police interfered during this last court case in Istanbul, even under the eyes of more than 100 police, and for 2 months making trips everywhere there on foot. And since the Court of Appeal ruled against the prohibition of the beret, and also none of the women, including those of them who do not wear the veil, and none of the private soldiers are obliged to wear the brimmed hat like some officials, and since there is absolutely no advantage in wearing it, and I have no official post, seeing that it is an item of official dress, and those who wear berets are not prosecuted, to propose that he wears the hat and resembles foreign priests, and to threaten him with court proceedings would certainly disgust anyone with a grain of conscience. For he is a recluse and does not mix with people, and so as not to busy his spirit with this ugly, illegal matter during Ramadan, and in order not to preoccupy his heart and spirit with his body, does not take medicines or call the doctor although he is seriously ill. For example, the person who was proposing this said that he has to obey orders. But how can you have orders with the force of arbitrary laws? Yes, in the Qur'an there are verses like, "O you who believe, obey God, and obey the messenger, and those charged with authority among you," which command obedience to leaders so as not to resemble the Jews and Christians. On condition it is not contrary to obedience to God and His prophets, upon whom be blessings and peace, a person may act on the understanding that he is completely with that obedience. Whereas in this case, although the laws of Islamic tradition command compassion to the sick and to strangers, and not to cause trouble or distress to those who serve the Qur'an and the sciences of belief for Allah's sake, they propose that a hermit who has renounced the world wear a hat like a foreign priest, which is contrary to the law not 10 but 100 times over, and is opposed to the traditional laws of Islam and tramples those sacred laws on account of some arbitrary orders. Treatments of this kind of someone like me who is extremely ill, extremely old, and at the door of the grave, is alone, a stranger, impecunious, and who for 35 years has abandoned the world so as not to act contrarily to the prophets upon whom be blessings and peace Sunnah, is without any doubt one foot of a ghastly conspiracy on account of anarchy and under the veil of communism to harm this country, nation, Islam, and religion. It is also a conspiracy against the religious deputies and democrats who intend to serve Islam and this country and have formed a front against the awesome distraction coming from outside. The religious deputies should beware. They should not leave it to me to defend against this serious conspiracy on my own. Postscript. For no advantage and illegally to order a devotee of Islam and self-sacrificing servant of the Qur'an who did not condescend to rise to his feet before the commander-in-chief of the Russians, although the commander deliberately passed in front of him 3 times, and in order to preserve the dignity of Islam, did not bow before him despite the threat of execution, and in order to defend Islam's honor, attached not the slightest importance to the threats of execution of the commander-in-chief of the British occupying forces Istanbul and those who had issued fatwas and opposed them in the press, saying, "Spit in the shameless faces of those tyrants," and who, in the presence of 50 deputies, declared, "Those who do not perform the prayers are traitors," and disregarded Mustafa Kemal's wrath and did not toad it to the military court, and replied to its intimidating questions, "I am ready to sacrifice my life for a single matter of the Sharia," and who has chosen solitude these last 28 years in order not to resemble non-Muslims. If it is said to such a person, "You have to resemble the Jewish or Christian priests," you have to wear a hat like they do, you have to oppose the consensus of all the Islamic ulama, otherwise we are going to punish you. Certainly, a person who has sacrificed all he has for the truth of the Qur'an would sacrifice 100 lives if he had them, as his biography testifies, even if he were to be decimated with knives and thrown into hell, let alone worldly prisons, penalties, and torture. What is the reason for this self-sacrificing devotee's endurance and his not retaliating negatively and with material force to the tyrannical injustices of the coward enemies of this country and religion, although he has considerable not material forces? I proclaim the following to you and to all people of conscience. The all-wise Qur'an has taught him the lessons of the Risale-i Nur, which instill a prohibitor in everyone's heart, so that with all their strength they preserve internal order and security, lest harm should come to 90 innocents on account of 10 irreligious atheists. I could otherwise take my revenge in one day on my cruel enemies of 28 years. Thus, on the way of preserving public order and for the sake of innocent people, he does not defend his honor and dignity against those who insult him, and he says, "I shall sacrifice not my worldly life, but if necessary my life in the hereafter for the Islamic nation." Said Nursi. An article by journalist Isa Abdul Qadir, which appeared in the newspaper Ad-Difa, published in Baghdad in 1954. The Baghdad newspaper Ad-Difa asked the following about the Risale-i Nur students. Is there any connection between the Risale-i Nur students in Turkey and the Muslim brothers? Do they have any relations? And what are the differences between them? Are the Risale-i Nur students in Turkey an independent group or society, like the groups called the Muslim Brothers, working for Islamic unity in Egypt and other Arab countries? Are they attached to those groups or to any one of them? My reply is this. The aim of both the Nur students and the Muslim Brothers is to serve the truths of Qur'an and belief and to work with the overall aim of securing Islamic unity and the happiness of Muslims in this world and the next. However, the Nur students differ from the Muslim Brothers in 5 or 6 respects. First difference. The Nur students are not involved in politics, they avoid them. If they are obliged to concern themselves with politics, they make them a tool of religion so that they may demonstrate the sacredness of religion in the face of those who exploit politics for irreligion. They are in no way a political society. Due to the situations in their countries, the Muslim Brothers, however, are involved in politics in order to support religion, and they are a political society. Second difference. The Nur students do not meet with their master, and they are not obliged to do so. They do not feel themselves compelled to meet with him. They do not consider it necessary to be together with him in order to receive instruction. Rather, the whole country is like a place of instruction. On their obtaining the books, they are taught by them instead of by their master. The treatises are each like a sa'id. Moreover, as far as they possibly can, the Nur students write the treatises out for no wage and distribute them free of charge to the needy so that they may read them and listen to them. Footnote: For 25 years, the Risale-i Nur was disseminated in this way in Anatolia, being written out by hand. In this way, the whole country has become a vast place of learning. The Muslim brothers, however, meet with their guides and leaders in general centers and go to visit them in order to receive instruction and orders. They also meet in the branches of that general society with their supreme master and those who are the equivalent of his deputies and successors and receive instruction and orders. And they obtain for the required price the newspapers and books produced in the centers and receive instruction from them too. Third difference. Just like the students of an elevated madrasa, religious school, or university, the Nur students learn through scholarly exchanges. A large province becomes like a madrasa. They teach each other and learn together although they do not see one another or know each other, and although they are far apart. However, due to the circumstances of their countries, the Muslim brothers produce books and magazines and distribute them everywhere. They come to know each other through them and receive instruction. Fourth difference. The Nur students have now spread to most of the Islamic countries, and they are numerous. In spreading in this way, they are present in various countries, but they do not need to obtain permission from the governments to meet together and do their work. For their way is not a political way, and they are not a political society, so they do not consider themselves obliged to obtain permission. However, due to their circumstances, the Muslim brothers are involved in politics and need to organize a society and open centers and branches, and are therefore obliged to obtain permission from the authorities wherever they are found. And they are not unknown like the Nur students. In this way, they have opened numerous branches in their general centers, including Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Saudi, the Maghrib, and Baghdad. Fifth difference. There are numerous different levels among the Nur students, from 7 or 8-year-old children who are learning the Arabic alphabet in mosques to learn the Qur'an, to elderly men and women of 70 to 90 years old, and from villagers and porters to prominent members of the National Assembly, and from private soldiers to high-ranking officers. The sole aim of all these many levels of Nur students is to become illuminated by the guidance of the noble Qur'an and truths of belief. All their endeavor is to spread knowledge, learning, and the truths of belief. They are known for not being involved with anything else. The fearsome trials these last 28 years and their cunning and jealous opponents have been unable to discover any aim apart from the sacred service, and have therefore been unable to convict them and root them. The Nur students do not feel themselves compelled to search for customers and supporters. They say, "Our duty is to serve. We do not seek customers. Let them come and seek us out and find us." They attach no importance to quantity. They prefer one person who is truly sincere to 100 others. For sure, like the Nur students, the Muslim brothers encourage and urge others to adhere to the sciences and learning of Islam and the truths of belief, but due to their situations and countries and their involvement with politics, they attach importance to quantity and increasing their numbers, and they seek supporters. Sixth difference. Just as true, sincere Nur students attach no importance to material benefits, so some of them, with their maximum frugality and contentment and poverty and fortitude and independence, they abstain in some respects with true sincerity and devotion in serving the Qur'an from the advantages of society. This is so that they will not be defeated in the face of the numerous, violent people of misguidance, nor give rise to doubts when calling the needy to the truth and to sincerity, nor make that sacred service the tool of anything other than divine pleasure. Although essentially the Muslim brothers follow the same aim, due to place and circumstances and other causes, they cannot give up the world like the Nur students. They do not consider themselves obliged to make that supreme self-sacrifice. Isa Abdul Qadir. Isa Abdul Qadir, a writer on the political newspaper Ad-Difa, which is published in Baghdad, says the following. Readers of Ad-Difa are asking me about Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, the guide of the Nur students. They asked for information about him and the Nur students in Turkey. So I am replying to them briefly. For the master, the Risale-i Nur and the Nur students are concerned with the Arabs, and the Arabs are taking a serious interest in them, for as the main grouping of Islam, they have begun to see great benefits from the Risale-i Nur. With the Risale-i Nur, the Nur students form an effective barrier against communism, both in Turkey and in the Arab world. This article was written considering conditions previous to the coming to power of Democrats, when according to the public prosecutor, the Nur students numbered 500,000. But now, there are now millions of them in Turkey, and every day they increase in number. As for the Risale-i Nur, it is spreading to such an extent that it is being sought eagerly not only in Turkey and the Islamic lands, but also in Europe and the West. Nothing can destroy the Nur students' enthusiasm. The Democrat government is to be highly commended for permitting the considerable services the students have performed for the Qur'an with the Risale-i Nur, so that the Islamic movement in the blessed Islamic world meets them with applause and appreciation. All the Muslim peoples of Iraq, the Arabs, Kurds, Turks, and Persians have greeted this sacred Islamic service and endeavor joyfully, and they hold the view that their brothers in Turkey are resisting the harmful effects of westernization. Isa Abdul Qadir. A letter written by our master to the Prime Minister, Adnan Menderes, who approves of and appreciates the services rendered by the Risale-i Nur to the country, nation, and Islam. In his name be he glorified. I would have liked to speak with a champion of Islam like Adnan Menderes, but my circumstances do not allow it, for I am very ill and not concerned with politics. I have therefore written this letter to speak in my place, instead of a face-to-face conversation. I am going to elucidate a few very brief principles for Adnan Menderes, the champion of Islam. The first is one of Islam's many fundamental laws and is a true meaning of the verse. No bearer of burdens can bear the burden of another. It is as follows. No one, neither friends nor relations, can be held responsible for another's crime. Whereas the partisanship of present party politics causes people to acquiesce in and consent to numerous innocents suffering harm on account of a single criminal. Due to a single criminal's crime, the supporters and relatives of the innocent are also maligned and humiliated, and because this multiplies the crime 100-fold, it gives rise to terrible hatred and enmity, and breeding malice and rancor, it forces retaliation in kind. This is a poison that completely overturns the life of society and prepares the ground for the intervention of external enemies. It is understood that the events and crises experienced in Iran and Egypt arose from action of this kind. But the situation with them is not the situation here. With us, it is comparatively less severe, only 1%. God protect us. If it had been like that here, it would have been terrible indeed. The sole solution for this danger is to make Islamic brotherhood and primary Islamic nationhood the foundation of that force for the protection of innocent people and to ensure that the crimes of criminals remain restricted to themselves. The above fundamental law is also the foundation of public peace and security. For example, true justice and the fundamental law of public order and security demands that if one innocent person and 10 criminals are found in a house or on a ship, the house or ship should not be attacked so that the innocent person may be saved and no harm comes to him, but when he is saved. Thus, according to this Qur'anic fundamental law, the disturbance of internal order and violation of security, thus casting into danger 90 innocents on account of 10 criminals, is a means of attracting divine wrath. Since, in these uncertain times, Almighty God has paved the way for a number of truly religious people to come to power, present circumstances warn that they should take this fundamental law of the Qur'an as a basis of action for themselves to shield themselves against their malicious enemies. Islam's second fundamental law is the Hadith. A people's ruler is its servant, which means that officialdom is service and should not lead to oppression and egotistical domination. But at the present time, egotism has burgeoned due to the absence of Islamic training and deficient worship. And because officialdom has been made into ranks for the practice of arbitrary domination rather than service, justice cannot be administered and is in a sense corrupted, like performing the prayers in any direction without the ablutions. And the people's rights are totally violated. The people's rights do not become hukukullah, that is, they are not sanctioned, that they may be rights. On the contrary, they are the cause of selfish injustices. Adnan Menderes has now said that they are going to enact whatever is required by the religion of Islam. But there is a strong possibility that in absolute opposition to the two above-mentioned fundamental laws, two awesome currents will go on the offensive in order to deceive the people with substantial bribes and will pave the way for foreign intervention. The first assault. In opposition to the first fundamental law, this has slaughtered 40 innocent people due to one criminal and set fire to a village. Such absolute despotism bribes officials, granting them power and control and gratifying their souls, while religious lovers of freedom are persecuted. The second assault. This is apparently a sort of nationalism which renounces the sacred nationhood of Islam and like the previous one is able to trample the rights of 100 innocents due to one criminal, but in reality, with its stick of racialism, strives against both the religious, freedom-loving Democrats and the members of other races who constitute 70% of this country's population, and the wretched Turks, and the policy is followed by the Democrats, producing only a racist brotherhood as an inauspiciously pleasurable bribe for good-for-nothing egotists. Out of their drunkenness, they do not pursue the extraordinary danger of turning into enmity the true brotherhood, which is 1,000 times more beneficial than the thrills they get from that racist comradeship. For example, racialism causes to be lost for the trivial worldly benefits of 400 useless loafers the moral and spiritual assistance received every day from the universal prayer, "O God, forgive all believing men and women," which is recited by 400 million true brothers with a sense of Islamic nationhood. This is a grave danger for both this country and the government, and the religious Democrats, and the Turks, and those who pursue it are not true Turks. The noble Turks avoid such errors. It is quite clear from their actions that these two groups are attempting to take advantage of everything and to overturn the religious Democrats, and they are being made to do so. The sole solution in the face of these opponents and the internal and external enemies and their destruction, which absolutely has to be implemented, is to rely on the unshakable power of the Qur'anic reality, with which 40 companions of the prophets, upon whom blessings and peace, challenged and prevailed over 40 states, and which for 1,400 years has had 3 or 4 million students, and to depend on the worldly pleasures and pleasures of everlasting happiness in the hereafter yielded by that reality. Otherwise, those pitiless internal and external enemies of yours will magnify one error you commit, and adding to it the crimes committed by the supporters of the former regime, will load them all on you, just as they did to others before you. This constitutes a danger for both you and the country and nation, the harms of which would be irreparable. In return for your services and your accepting these facts, I, myself, and our Nurji brothers will pray to Almighty God for your success in your works for the good of Islam and for your preservation from the above-mentioned dangers. The third, another fundamental law related to the social life of Islam is the Hadith. The believers are like a well-built structure with one firmly supporting the other. That is, to forget internal hostilities in the face of the aggression of external enemies and to support one another. Even the most primitive tribes have understood the advantages of this fundamental law, for when attacked by an enemy from outside, they desist from fighting against one another until the enemy is repulsed, even if the member of one tribe has killed the father or brother of someone belonging to another tribe, and they support one another. So, it is with 1,000 regrets that we say that incidents occur in which, as a consequence of the partisanship that arises from egotism, self-advertisements, arrogance, and cruel politics, people shower blessings on a Satan if he assists their side, and curse angels if they help the opposing side. In fact, I saw one righteous religious scholar speak so badly about another righteous scholar as to accuse him of disbelief, while enthusiastically praising an atheist who was inimical to Islam yet held the same ideas as himself and supported him. It was because of this that I have given up politics these last 35 years, as though fleeing from the devil. Furthermore, now it appears that when someone perpetrated a serious misdemeanor towards both Ramadan and the marks of Islam and this religious nation, his opponents were pleased at the situation. Whereas, just as consenting to disbelief is disbelief, so agreeing with misguidance, wise, and wrongdoing is misguidance, wise, and wrongdoing. I understood from this extraordinary situation that with the idea of exonerating themselves from their crimes in the nation's eyes, they want to show their opponents to be more irreligious and guilty than themselves, and to see them thus. Awesome injustices of this sort both have perilous consequences, and overturning social morality resemble a serious conspiracy against this country, a nation, and Islamic supremacy. I was going to write more, but for now I am sufficing with explaining these 3 essential points for the religious promoters of liberty. Said Nursi.